Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. Alright, so this video is going to be my March wrap-up. All the books that I read in the month of March. I didn't quite get to everything that I wanted to, but you'll see why. I read a total of 8 books, and I had 1 DNF. Hopefully I can figure out how to put a graph somewhere on here, but if not, I'll go ahead and say what my star ratings for what these books were. So I read a 2-star book, a 2.5-star book, a 3.5-star book, a 4-star book, and then 1 reread that was 5 stars, and then 3 books that were new to me that were also 5 stars. And then I also had 1 DNF. I like wrap-ups that start with the lowest ranked books and then work their way up to the highest ranked book. So I think I'm going to do that for this video. So I might as well start out with the book that I didn't quite finish because I couldn't quite get into it, and that would be my best friend's Exorcism. I was actually planning on reading the book in April, but I figured I'd try to get a head start on it, and I had already read a few chapters and was enjoying it, but I got like, I don't know, a little bit more than halfway through it, and something wasn't clicking with me. I actually enjoyed the first few chapters where just our 2 main characters were starting to get to know each other as kids and really starting to build their friendship. But by the time they became teenagers and were in high school, I feel like the book just got bogged down in all of the 80s references, because that's, you know, that's what a lot of entertainment in general is going for nowadays. Like 80s nostalgia, and this is definitely what that book is going for, but I need more to it than that, than just that. Alright, so the lowest ranked book that I actually finished, that I gave 2 stars, was Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade. This was the March pick for the Shelf Space Book Club, and I had pretty high hopes going into it because this is all about, or what I thought it was going to be, was deconstructing the Chosen One trope. And basically within the first few chapters, you know, this is kind of a spoiler, but the Chosen One dies in the 3rd chapter, hilariously. And what I thought was going to happen was that our other main character, who's the best friend of the Chosen One, was going to have to, like, deal with his best friend dying and really mourn his loss and be very conflicted to try to step into his shoes. But that's not at all what I got from this book, and just, it's just not what I wanted. And I can see people enjoying it for what it is, but for me, I didn't enjoy it. And oftentimes, my criticisms for books is that they're too long and that they're not edited enough. But this book, it's only like 300 pages. I feel like she could have fleshed out more stuff, and it would have explained a lot more, because a lot of the stuff that's happening, you really have no context. And that really bugged me too. Yeah, I'd say overall, it's not like a terrible book, but it just wasn't for me, and I gave it 2 stars. The next book I have to talk about is Agatha Christie's At Bertram's Hotel, which is one of the Miss Marple novels. This is the 3rd Miss Marple that I've read now. The very first one that I read, I think it was called Murder at the Vicarage or something. I didn't like that one. And then I read another one called Body in the Library. That one I actually really enjoyed. But this one, it was just kind of the same deal as Murder in the Vicarage. I just wasn't a huge fan, and I'm starting to think that Miss Marple is just not doing it for me. I'm going to try more from her, but she's definitely not a priority for me when it comes to Agatha Christie. I have a lot of Agatha Christie books to read, but those are gonna be put on the back burner. Alright, everything else from here on out I actually enjoyed, or really enjoyed. And this first book is Age of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, and it is the second book in the Legends of First Empire series. The first book, Age of Myth, is actually one of my all-time favorite fantasy books. So going into this book, I had very high expectations. They weren't quite met. It wasn't quite as good as the first one. And that's mainly because my love for the first book comes from Wraith and Malcolm and their banter. And they're not in this book a whole lot because he introduces more character perspectives. And they were good. It just wasn't what I loved from the first book. The ending is really what saved the book from being any lower. I did give it 3.5 stars, and I will be continuing with the series in April with Age of War, the third book. In this next book, I wasn't supposed to read. It wasn't on my TBR, but I found it at a bookstore, and I figured it's a young adult book. I could probably read it pretty quickly, and I was right, and it was pretty good. It's called The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I gave this book 4 stars. It's one of those books where I'm not sure if I would have enjoyed it as much if I didn't have the audiobook to go along with it. The way they do what's called the noise in this book is done brilliantly in the audio form of the book. Young adult, kind of like dystopian or fantasy, just any kind of YA book in general can be very hit or miss for me. I loved Hunger Games when that came out, but I wasn't a huge fan of the third book. And then Divergent, I liked the first book in that series, but not the rest of them. And then I wasn't a huge fan of Maze Runner. So I really haven't read that much YA in a long time. But this book was very promising, and I will be picking up the sequels. And hopefully they're just as good. And hopefully, it doesn't go down like the Hunger Games or Divergent. I will say the main criticism I have for this book is that towards the middle and the end of the book, it got very repetitive, and that's a big pet peeve for me when it comes to books. I want something new to be happening, but a lot of the times they're running away from someone or a lot of people, and it's just like, all right, can we do something new here? But overall, I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I love the characters. I love the cool foreign planet that they're on, and I love the premise of the men in this society can hear each other's thoughts, and then there's no women, but then this young boy comes across a girl, and he's like, well, now what do I do? And these last 4 books I have to talk about are all 5-star books, including this book, which is a reread for me. I already knew it was going to be 5 stars, so it'd be The Last Wish, which is the first short story collection in the Witcher series. Yeah, at the very end of March, I basically just read 1 short story a day, and I already knew going into them what they were all about and that I was going to love them again. So there's not too much to say about this one. Easy 5 stars. And I will be picking up Sword of Destiny in April. That's it. This next book was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I'm glad it came out early this year, and it would be Later by Stephen King. I already have a dedicated review for this book on my channel. If you're interested, you can go check that out. Maybe I'll link it at the bottom somehow. I'm still new to this, but I'll just give some quick thoughts on this book. I loved it. It's very short, which I typically love when King writes short novels and novellas. I gave this book 5 stars. The premise, of course, is seemingly unoriginal. It's about a boy who can see dead people, but the way King puts his own spin on it and his own rules to this premise is very intriguing. This next behemoth of a book is essentially the reason why I didn't get to everything that I wanted to in this month. But, you know, it's Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Which, it's one book, but come on, it's the length of 2 or 3 books. And of course, I love Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th book. I won't say it's my favorite. I still think the first book, Way of Kings, is my all-time favorite Stormlight book, but it's right up there. Either number 2 or 3. Definitely better than Oathbringer. I had a little bit of pacing issues towards the middle of the book, but parts 1 and 2 were great, and then parts 4 and 5 were absolutely terrific. One of the best Stormlight endings ever. And there's just so many standout character moments in this book. Definitely more than Oathbringer, and the character moments that are in this book are, you know, up there with Way of Kings and Words of Radiance for me. And obviously it's the 4th book in the series, so I can't really talk about too much detail about what goes on in this book, but if you're a Stormlight fan, I'm sure you've read this and you know what I'm talking about. And if you're not, go pick up Way of Kings, because it's great. And the last book I have to talk about in this video is my favorite book I read in March. And not only that, I happen to have put it in a recent video, and it is now in my top 10 books of all time, and that would be Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I also have a dedicated review for this, and again, I'll try to link it down below. I'm new to this. But anyway, in that video, I just go over my absolute love for this book, and in my top 10 books of all time video, I put it at number 10, and that's tentative. No pun intended. It's tentative because I think in the future, once I reread it more, that it's gonna steadily rise up and up. Because a lot of the books in my top 10 I've read several times, and I literally just read this a few weeks ago, so I'm just gonna have to give it more time, but I loved this book. I loved it. And then a book that I tried to get to in the month of March that I just didn't have quite enough time to get to would be The Dragon Republic. It's a reread for me, so I already know what happens, and I only got, I think, like 100 pages in. I'm going to try to finish it in April because I really want to read The Burning God and read, you know, the conclusion to the story, because I love the first 2 books. But I gotta read this one first. So March was actually a pretty damn good reading month for me. There were a couple of books I wasn't a huge fan of, but that's okay. That's gonna happen when you read a bunch of books. But overall, almost all of the books I either really liked or they're like all-time favorites for me now, which is always good. Anyway, what did you guys think of this video? Were there any books on here that you've read, that you loved, that you hated, that you were mad about? What books did you read in March? I want to know. Please put it down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, you can give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.